Hey everyone, welcome back to another video by Simplilearn. This is Harsh Bhardwaj, and in today's session we will learn about constructor and destructor in C++. So without further ado, let's get started. In this session we will understand what is a constructor in C++, its declaration, and how a constructor is different from the function. Then we will cover types of constructors, that is default constructor, parameterized constructor, and a copy constructor. And then we will discuss constructor overloading and destructor in C++. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to never miss an update. So first is, what is a constructor in C++? In C++, constructors are special functions that are different from normal functions. They are used to initialize objects of a class. Whenever an object is created, the constructor is invoked or called automatically. Even if we do not create a constructor, the compiler automatically creates a default constructor. Now, let's move to the declaration of the constructor. Constructors are the member functions of a class that has the same name as that of the class, and it doesn't have any return type. A constructor can be defined inside the class and outside the class as well using the scope resolution operator. The syntax of a constructor is as mentioned. Inside the class cons, we can see there is a constructor which has the same name as that of class, that is cons, and we can initialize variables inside it. This constructor will be invoked automatically when the object is created. Now let's understand how the constructor is different from functions. There are some differences between constructors and functions. So the first is, constructor doesn't have a return type, unlike function which has a return type. Next is, the name of the constructor must be the same as that of the class, and it is not so in case of function. Third is, whenever an object is created, then a constructor is invoked. And the last one is, function can be a virtual function, but it is not so in case of constructors. So these are some differences between constructor and a function. Now coming to types of constructors. There are actually three types of constructors in C++. That is default constructor, parameterized constructor, and a copy constructor. So let's start with the default constructor. A default constructor is a constructor that doesn't have any arguments inside it. It can either be declared explicitly or can be generated automatically, which means even if we do not define the constructor, then also it is generated by the compiler. For example, here cons is the default constructor. In this case, the name of the class would have been cons. That is why the name of the constructor is cons. Now coming to the parameterized constructor. A parameterized constructor is similar to that of the default constructor. The only difference is we can pass the arguments to the parameterized constructor. The constructor can be overloaded and also be used to initialize elements. Here is an example of the parameterized constructor. Cons is the name of the constructor, and n1 and 2 are the parameters of the constructor. Now coming to the copy constructor. A copy constructor is a type of constructor which initializes an object using another object of the class. In this constructor, properties of one object is copied to another object. This copy constructor is invoked when an object is passed as a parameter. If a class has pointers or there is some dynamic memory allocation, then it is necessary to have a copy constructor. Its syntax is as follows. Here cons is the name of the constructor and %obj is the reference of the object. As we have understood all of these three constructors, so let's go ahead to our next topic, that is constructor overloading. Like functions, constructor can also be overloaded, and it is pretty much the same as function overloading. The constructor must have the same names, and the difference in the number or the type of arguments will decide which constructor should be called. Here in the example, we can see two constructors with the same names as that of the class are being overloaded. Here the difference in the number of parameters will determine which constructor will be called. Now coming to the last topic, that is destructors in C++. Just like the constructor, the destructor is also a special function which deletes or destructs the object as soon as the object goes out of scope. It basically deallocates the memory that has been assigned to the variables. The name of the destructor is same as that of the class name with a tilde sign. The destructor doesn't have a return type and it also doesn't take any arguments. And here is the syntax of the destructor. So as we have covered the theoretical aspect of this topic, so let's go ahead to our code editor and cover the practical examples on this topic as well. So this is Visual Studio Code, and here we will do some examples of constructors and destructors in C++. So let's start with default constructor example. First of all, we'll create a new file and we'll name it cons1.cpp. Alright, so now first of all we'll write the header files #include iostream. Now we'll write the using namespace standard. Now we'll start with the main function, and inside the main function we'll create an object. So now we will create an object of a class. Let's say the name of the class is book and the object is B. Alright, let's write this. Now we have to create the class. So let's create the class book, which is the name of the class, and inside the class we will declare a variable which is private. So let's start. Pages is the name of the variable and we'll make this variable as private. Alright, after this we'll write the public access specifier, and now we will create a constructor, and inside the constructor we will initialize this variable pages. So alright, and make sure to make the constructor inside the public access specifier. Alright, now we'll assign, let's say 250 to this variable pages, that is the number of pages is 250, let's say. Now we will display a message like, let's say the name of the book is the compound effect. It's a famous book, and after that we'll write endl for the next line. Now again we will display a message which will display number of pages. So we'll write number of pages, and now we will write the variable pages. Alright, and after the class we will put the semicolon, and let's try to understand it again. When we create this object B, this constructor will be called, and this variable, that is pages, will be initialized with the value 250. Then this message will be displayed, and then the value of this variable pages will be displayed. As we can see, we haven't passed any arguments to this constructor. It is a default constructor. We have created an object of the class book, and that's how the constructor is getting called. And let's try to run this. Hope it works. Firstly we have to save it by pressing Ctrl and S. Now let's try to run it. As you can see, the name of the book is the compound effect and number of pages is 250, is that we have initialized it 250. So this is the example of a default constructor. Now let's do another example. Now we'll do an example of parameterized constructor. So let's name this first cons2.cpp. Alright, now we'll include the header file #include iostream using namespace standard. Now we'll start with the main function. So we'll write int main, and inside the main function we will create an object of a class, let's say bar. The object of this class would be b, and we will pass the arguments, let's say 40 and 35. Alright, by mistake we have wrote this. Alright, now after that we'll write return 0. Now let's create this class bar. So we'll write class bar, and inside the class we will declare two variables which will be private. So let's say private int, and the name of the variable is drink, and another variable would be people. Alright, now we have to create the constructor. So we'll write the public access specifier, and now we'll create the constructor which is of the same name as that of class, that is bar. And now the parameters would be d and p. So we are passing these parameters, that is 40 and 35, to this constructor, as this is a parameterized constructor. So now we will assign these parameters to the private values, that is drink and people, that is the two variables. So we'll write drink equal d, that is we are assigning the value of d to the variable drink. So, and we will do the same for p variable. We'll assign the value of p to the people variable. Once we are done with this, then we have to compute it or do something about it. So let's say we have to multiply it. So it would be total cash, like the number of drinks into number of people, that how many cash is collected by selling those drinks. So we'll create this variable int total cash. This is a function. Inside this function we will multiply the cost of a single drink with the number of people. So let's say, as the return type is int, so we have to return, we can't display over here. So drink into people, drink into people. Alright, now semicolon in the end, and we have to call this function as well. So let's do that. We'll write cout, and then we will display a message, let's say total cash collected. Then now we will call this function total cash, b.total cash. B is the object and total cash is the function. Alright, after that we have already mentioned return 0. So now save it by pressing Ctrl and S. and let's try to run this. As you can see, total cash collected 1400, and we know 40 into 35 we'll get 1400. That is the right answer. So as we can see, here we have created this object B and passed these arguments 40 and 35, and this is the parameterized constructor bar. These values are then assigned to these variables drink and people, and then we have called this function b.totalCache, this function over here, and the value by multiplying drink into people is 1400. That is 14 to 35 equals to 1400. So this is the example of a parameterized constructor. Now let's create a new file and we'll do an example of constructor overloading. So let's name it first cons3.cpp. So here we will do an example of constructor overloading. So first of all, we'll write the header files hash include iostream, then namespace standard, then again we will start with the main function, and inside the main function we will write the name of the class. Let's say the name of the class would be overload, and the name of the object is O1. So here we will create a parameterized constructor. So that is why we will send two arguments, let's say 20 and 4, and we will create another object overload O2 because we want to do constructor overloading. So we have created O2 object, and here we will pass, let's say, 3 arguments. So we will pass, let's say, 50, 65, 30. In the first object, in the first constructor, we are passing 2 arguments, that is 20 and 4. In the second constructor, we will pass 3 arguments, 50, 65 and 30. Alright, now let's write return 0, and now we can create the class, let's say class overload. Now inside this class, first of all we will create this variable result res. Alright, inside this, after this we will declare public access specifier, and we will create the constructors. The constructor would be a parameterized constructor because we are passing the arguments. So overload is the name of the constructor with an capital O, and we are passing 2 arguments in the first constructor. So int x comma int y. Now in this we will multiply and we will store it in this res variable. So x into y. Alright, after this the second constructor, and in this constructor we are passing 3 arguments, and as you can see the name of both the constructors are same as that of the class, but the only difference is the number of arguments. In this constructor we are passing 3 arguments, and now we will store the sum of all of these 3 variables, x plus y plus z. Once it is done, we will put a semicolon in the end, and now we have to somehow display the result. So we will create a function. Int is the data type, result is the name of the function, and we will simply return the variable res. And now we will call this function inside the main class. So before that, we will display a message. Let's say result of multiplication is, right, O1 dot res, O1 dot result, sorry, because result is the name of the function and we are calling the function. After that, end line, then we'll write result of addition is, then we'll write O2 dot result and semicolon, and we have already mentioned return 0. So let's save it by pressing Ctrl S and let's try to run this. There is some error. Okay, this is a scope error. We have to include this function inside this class. So let's say now let's try to run this by, after saving this, let's run it. Alright, by mistake we write this wrong. Alright, now let's save it and now let's try again. Here it is, result of multiplication is 80 and result of addition is 145, as you can see, and 20 into 4 is 80, and when we add 50 plus 30, 80 plus 65 would be 145. So our result is right and we have successfully compiled the program and run it. So in this example we are doing the constructor overloading, as we are passing these two arguments to this constructor with same name as that of this constructor, and we are passing 3 arguments to this constructor, and we are not actually calling them, we are just creating the object and passing the arguments. Okay, now let's do an example in which we will use Destructor as well. So let's create the new file and name this as cons4.cpp. Alright, now let's include the header files. Now namespace standard. Alright, now we'll write int main. Inside int main we will write the name of the function. Let's say the name of the function is formula1 and f is the object. And now we will pass the parameters, let's say 370 and 4. Here we are passing the speed and the pickup of a particular car, and let's make it f instead of d. So f is the object and formula1 is the name of the class. After that, for now, let's say return 0, and now we will create a class formula1. We'll declare 2 variables which are private, int speed and int pickup. Now we will create a constructor which is parameterized. Before that we will use public access specifier, and now we will create this constructor formula1, and the parameters are int s comma int p. Now inside it, first of all we'll display a message saying that this is a constructor. Alright, after that we'll write endl. Now we will assign the parameters to these variables. We'll assign the value of s to speed and the value of p to pickup. Alright, after that we'll make a function display, and we can display inside this function as the data type is void, and so we'll write speed is, then we'll write the speed variable and endl as well. Then we'll write pickup is pickup variable, then endl. Alright, now we can create a destructor. We'll use tilde sign, then formula1, which is the name of the constructor. Then here we'll write a message so that we get to know that we are inside the destructor. So we'll write formula1, inside it we'll write this is a destructor. And the sign is, here it is. Now we'll write semicolon after the class, and so first of all, as the object is created, the parameterized constructor is called. 370 and 4 would be assigned to these variables speed and pickup, and then using the function, here we will call this function display. So we'll write f, which is the object, dot display, which is the name of the function, and that's it. Then once the values are assigned, then these values will be displayed when this function is called using the object f, and then this is a destructor is called as the destructor is called in the end of the function when the scope ends. So when the scope of class object is ended, then this is a destructor is displayed. That is why we have displayed this message. So after saving it, let's try to run this. Here we can see this is a constructor. First this is getting printed, then speed is 370, pickup is 4, and this is a destructor, as we can see, is getting printed in the last. And if we just cut it over here and just paste it here, and we can just paste it over here and save it, and let's try to run this again. There's a variable by mistake we have wrote. Alright, now save it and run it again. As we can see, this is a constructor, speed is 370, pickup is 4. This is a destructor. It is again getting printed in the last. So this shows that the destructor deletes the object as soon as the object goes out of scope, that is in the last. So these were some examples of constructors and destructors in C++. You can try some more examples on it. It will help you in understanding this topic in a better way. Alright guys, with that we have come to the end of this video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I hope it really helped you all. Thanks for watching, stay safe and keep learning.
Hi there, if you like this video, subscribe to the Simplilearn YouTube channel and click here to watch similar videos. To nerd up and get certified, click here.